Welcome back to Animating Every Day Until I'm Employed, everybody. This week is very exciting because wouldn't you know it, I was actually able to come up with a finished product to be proud of. Last week I talked about how I'm going to be putting that personal Warrior Cats project aside for a little bit while I work on something new for my portfolio, and pivoting my focus has been so refreshing. As much as I love my Warrior Cats, it was definitely getting to the point where I was slogging through the work every week to the point that I was barely getting anything done. And of course, now that I'm working on something else, all I can think of is how nice it would be to zone out and fall back into that familiar project. But that's when I know it's important to put it aside, because I haven't really been animating thoughtfully for the past few weeks, which means I was getting both bored and complacent. So in order to ensure that I can approach that project with refreshed and discerning eyes, I jumped on over to something extremely different: science fiction world building. When I'm starting something new, especially something outside my comfort zone, getting started is the biggest hurdle. I am so busy obsessing over the cost-benefit analysis of, is it even worth my time if I don't know exactly how to do it already, and how much of my limited energy am I going to have to spend just learning my way around a new skill, that I put off trying anything new. It's much easier to sit down and work when the hard part, aka the thumbnailing and storyboarding and rough animation, is already done. I'm very guilty of enjoying a rote task that I can zone out on for hours, but if I only do the part I enjoy, I'll never be able to create anything new myself. In order to live, I can't just do the things that I like to do. It's absolutely unfair. So true, Izitsumi. So is there a trick to getting started other than just sucking it up and doing it? Not that I've found yet. So far, the best I can do is start very, very small with some rough thumbnails. But before I've done even that much, my process is a whole lot easier if I'm adapting something that already exists. Usually in film, this comes in the form of a script, but I kind of hate script writing, so naturally I make everything even harder on myself by writing prose instead. Luckily, this science fiction universe is one I've had since middle school, and while that surely comes with its own amount of cringe, it also means that I've been turning it over in my head for over a decade, and during a creative writing class in college, I had the opportunity to approach a part of this universe as a short story. And while I never got the whole thing finished, I got enough of it put to page that I'm able to read it back and extract a few key visuals that might inspire my thumbnails. Here's how those turned out. And I even colored them, would you believe it? Yes, I am evolving every day. Now, I already knew that I wanted to work on that first thumbnail with the planet for this week, but I was still avoiding actually sitting down at my desk to work. Does anyone else experience excruciating emotional agony every time they have to sit at a desk instead of in bed? Because it's seriously been getting in the way of my life for the past, 10 years. Anyway, in the interest of not leaving my bed for an extra day, and knowing that I really wanted to force myself to dig into actual proper world building, I dove headfirst into designing some alien camels. Now, for context, and because I love to talk about my writing ideas, this story is essentially about a series of parallel dimensions that are all derived from our universe, which exists as a sort of core blueprint for every dimension beyond it. Each dimension is representative of a core object or concept from our own, and for this particular dimension, the concept is dust. Beyond dust in a literal sense, this dimension digs into spiritual concepts as well, interpreting dust as a form and consequence of creation and destruction. This alternate Earth is entirely covered in a dust desert and is ravaged by a constant, massive dust storm. This storm is the source of everything that is created and destroyed within its reach, and it creates and takes away life in equal turn. When I wrote it into prose, the story began with the main character Dace at his father's funeral, which was celebrated as the biggest achievement of the man's life, as dying is culturally interpreted as a consequence of achieving the path that the deified storm sets before an individual. Confused by his grief, which no one else seems to share, and plagued by the guilt that came from knowing his parents abandoned all personal aspirations to raise him when he was given to them by the storm, he sets out on a journey to confront the storm himself to discover if his father really did live a meaningful life. Along the way, he meets a camel driver, saves a dying woman, and rescues an infant born before him in the middle of the desert, and each of these encounters exists to teach him different perspectives on the concept of destiny, and what it means to choose one's own path. But how does one get all of these complex ideas about the nature of this alternate dimension across without the ability to hold the reader's nose to the page while I exposit at them with paragraphs of flowery prose? Well, it's all in the small stuff. Subtle things I can use to show the viewer that this world, though apparently similar to ours in many ways, is entirely separate from our own. Ergo, alien camels. They're still called camels, of course. Again, this world is technically still Earth, and I want to balance the differences with the similarities. But they're adapted to a different environment. They're specially attuned to sensing where, for example, an oasis might appear so they can drink water and find food before it disappears again. And out in the middle of the desert, these things appear and disappear within hours. They endure heat and constant dust storms and scarce resources and travel long distances. And many of them are domesticated. Or maybe they're wild. Or maybe there are several different divergent species. Anyway, the point is that I dipped my amateur toes into creature design, and while it's probably nothing too impressive to look at, it was a good experience for me, who has comparatively limited experience drawing animals, and even more limited experience with creature design. I settled on this design for the domestic caravan camels. I wanted to keep the essence of a camel with a little flavor. The long, thick tail is used for cover in strong storms, and the long ears are used to sense changes in the wind or in the dunes when dragged along the ground that indicate incoming changes in the environment, but in non-caravan camels are bred for visual appeal. Because the ears are sensitive, they are also where the reins are arranged, allowing riders to guide a camel with a minimal input. Is this the most humane interpretation? Probably not. But if we're being honest, do humans always handle animals with the most humane approach? There are artists out there who know a lot more about theoretical biology than I do, and as a fan of those artists, I hope they don't laugh too hard at my reasoning here. But then again, if they do laugh, they probably have some really good ideas about how to improve my design, so I hope they'd reach out with that critique so I could fix things. Finally, I'd had enough of my own procrastination, and it was time to sit down and get to work on this week's official project. For this week's animation, I wanted to start simple with the planet shot I put in my first thumbnail. That shot was the very first image I had in mind last week when I decided to jump into this project, but it was kind of boring when I just sketched it out as a planet on its own, and I wanted to use this shot to establish right away that something about this planet was different from our universe. So I decided that while we're enjoying the serene outer space view of other Earth, the moon would be the perfect first victim of the storm's capricious whims. So I made a quick storyboard indicating how the moon disappears and reappears with like literally 4 panels. Originally I also had it so that the storm also visibly moves on the planet's surface, but later on I wasn't so sure how well that would translate. When viewing a planet from so far away, would it interfere with the perceived scale of the planet if you could see the storm moving from here? I kind of want to go back in and test it, but for now I decided to hold off. I was too impatient to make a proper rough pass, and since the forms I was working with were so simple, I decided to just go ahead and animate the line pass in one go. I knew what I wanted in my mind. I wanted the moon to look like it was dissolving, but not in like an I don't feel so good Mr. Stark kind of way. It needed more weight, like it was being ripped apart and then reformed by some kind of irresistible gravity. This was kind of a tall order for someone who rarely dabbled in effects animation, so it took me more than a few tries to get it looking close enough to how I wanted it. Looking back now, I'm wondering if I shouldn't slow it down or if it looks too explosive for what I was going for. Good things to think about for the future, but in the interest of getting this finished in time, I pressed on. And I didn't realize it at the time, but this whole animation was going to take a lot less time than I thought it would. It took me a few hours to go from thumbnails to final lines, and the next day I was able to get all the coloring done in one sitting too. From flats to shadows to final background paintings, it only took me 2 days to make this scene. And then I exported it and the colors were shit. You know what that means. Time to confront my arch nemesis, Adobe After Effects. Thankfully, while I was complaining to Randstar about this, Star suggested using Lumetri Color to fix it, so I didn't even have to wade through the trenches of YouTube tutorials or the help bar to figure out how to do it. It took me like 10 minutes to get it looking good, and that honestly saved me hours of agony about it because I hate After Effects. For some reason during college, my computer had like a grudge against After Effects or something, and I could never use it because the main editing window wanted to appear on a separate monitor that didn't exist, so I could never actually see what I was doing. And it never got fixed until I wiped my computer completely, and then suddenly it worked. Truly a mystery that tarnished my experience with After Effects forever, because to this day, I picture opening it and I am just filled with reminiscent frustration and despair knowing that my final project is never going to be on time because I'll be up all night trying to magically line up a PNG sequence in an application I can't see. Shout out to my final sophomore year animation project that looked like fucking shit. But with my friend's advice at my side, I was able to wade through the layers of trauma even when After Effects tried to start shit by telling me my computer's disk was too full to open the app. And we came out the other side with this finished product, which looks much better than the initial export. In terms of things I would like to go back and fix or keep in mind for next time, I think I could have gone harder with the shadows on the moon or added a cast shadow on the planet or like picked a consistent location for the sun to be. Yeah, I should have thought about that to start, honestly. I also might want to experiment with moving the storm across the planet's surface, like I mentioned earlier, or test different versions of the moon's dissolving animation to see if I can achieve different effects or feelings with a different approach. But for now, I'm really happy with how this turned out, especially since it's probably the first fully colored animated rendering I've ever done entirely on my own. The walk cycles were colored, but after I saw the roadkill god wasn't going to fit in his environment, I kinda gave up on completing the rendering. I was so ahead of schedule that I actually went ahead and started animating another scene from my thumbnails. I think having a group scene would be a really good idea, but to be honest, it sounds like a fucking nightmare. And I kind of went back and forth on whether to commit to it or not. Then I remembered I wouldn't have to work on it forever, just for a week. And that motivated me to see how far I could get to start with. So here we are with the first roughs. I don't especially want to make this super smooth. It's mostly about getting my point across, but I also want to make something I'm proud of, so I'll have to experiment with what I can do. Next week, we'll see how far we've gotten in this group scene. Thank you all so much for stopping in for this week's update. It's really exciting to be moving forward and making new things, even if they're really short and simple like this. Kind of gives me something to talk about instead of just like, hey, I'm back again with like 5 more panels drawn in the same thing that you've seen for the past 2 months, and honestly it's not really getting better, so yeah, there's my 3-minute video, bye! Next week will probably be less complete since we're jumping into a much bigger challenge, but that's part of the fun. See what we can get done each week and broaden our experience while we're at it. It's been a pleasure as always. Much love, and I'll see you guys in the next one.